Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, sir. I believe strongly in accountability.
Now, Boeing paid a criminal fine of $243 million, correct?
I don't know the precise number, but I assume that's correct.
You must know the precise number. You're the CEO of the company. It only happened 5 years ago.
5 years ago, and I
4 years ago.
Yep.
Boeing paid $243 million in a criminal penalty.
Well, they do their regimen of pre-flight checks. They do their, and every airline has their own prescribed pre-flight checks. They're based on Boeing flight crew operating procedures, but the airlines have the option to define their own for their particular operation. But the pilots go through their pre-flight checks on the airplane. They check the various systems, understand status lights, hazard lights, everything else that might appear in the flight deck.
The post-COVID moment in the aerospace industry has been unbelievably difficult to navigate. We have 10,000 suppliers. We put almost 2.5 million parts into a 787. Boeing, because it's big and it has resources, even those were strained. We were able to keep more than most, but like you say, we turned over a lot of people, and yes, a lot of experienced people. Our supply chain experienced enormous turnover. McKinsey, what he refers to is about probably half our people, engineering in particular, work on the development of airplanes, and half work in support of production operations. So with respect to the accidents, where we were focused on the description of the changes, and they're big and they're significant across the engineering department, we're focused on preventing the design problem from ever happening again. Human factors, a whole new team, a whole new approach, a set of disciplines around it, et cetera. Alaska, very different.
Yeah.
I'm happy to provide that, at least with respect to the plan.
I would really like to understand, because I think if what you have said is, and the plan that you have moving forward is that that we need a more highly skilled workforce. I would assume that would mean a better compensated workforce that is now more highly skilled. I want to pick up on a conversation that a couple of my colleagues have started out in this notion of culture. And, culture is incredibly important for it to last.
I talked about all the players in that process, the suppliers, your manufacturing associates, your management, the FAA, which, by the way, the FAA has only turned 172 documents over this committee as well. They're not exactly, as is true in just about every government agency that I've tried to do oversight on, they're not very transparent. But the FAA, and then finally the airlines and their maintenance crews and the pilots. Can you just kind of talk the way through that, even if Boeing doesn't reach perfection, there are other steps beyond that to try and catch errors.
Boeing paid $243 million in a criminal penalty. It paid $500 million to the families who lost loved ones in the MAX crashes. And it paid $1.77 billion in compensation to airline customers. Those numbers correct?
Yes.
As to any of those amounts that were paid, was Boeing insured?
I don't have a precise number for you.
You don't have a precise number, but Boeing was insured.
Probably.
Therefore, Boeing didn't have to pay.
You're in charge of a company, you're getting paid $33 million a year. You're in charge of a company that has systematically, over decades now, shipped out its jobs, shipped out its production. Over the last decade, while you've either been in charge as CEO or on the board, stock prices have rose 600% at Boeing. You've, in fact, done $59 billion in returning cash to shareholders, $20 billion of that in dividends, $39 billion of that in stock buybacks. Some people are doing great here. I'm just wondering, given the fact that your airplanes are falling out of the sky, do you think that any of that has to do with the fact that you really don't make that much anymore?
I would not say the latter part of that sentence. There was a judgment that was made by ourselves, our design engineers, and the certification process that could never happen, but it did.
Well, now you're going to make me really angry because the evidence shows, in fact, that the engineers working on this plane knew that that faulty control system drove the nose down under certain circumstances, and pilots, in fact, Lions Air and Ethiopian Air struggled to lift that nose as the plane plummeted toward the sea. More than 5 years after the MAX crashes, you're once again making promises and seeming commitments. They seem highly aspirational. They are very general to correct course. Do you think Boeing has done enough to date to make those kinds of corrections? And what would you say to the whistleblowers who have come forward and faced retaliation?
Senator, thank you for the question. I ask myself that question every day. Have we done enough? I remind everyone the findings and the accidents.
But have you reviewed, for example, your incentive systems that maybe would drive that kind of behavior? You know, having to meet quotas, or have you reviewed that?
Yeah, this year we made a number of significant changes to our incentive structure that really emphasizes all things safety, including the running a just culture with that respect. And a just culture, I think, is the environment that you would like us to run. And so yes, that incentive alignment is now in place.
So prior to our last hearing, one of the articles I read, whether fair or unfair, talked about, and your disclosures, it's probably the SEC, where you were scoring high on ESG and DEI, and your score was 0 on your quality.
But it did.
Well, now you're going to make me really angry because the evidence shows, in fact, that the engineers working on this plane knew that that faulty control system drove the nose down under certain circumstances, and pilots, in fact, Lions Air and Ethiopian Air struggled to lift that nose as the plane plummeted toward the sea. And they couldn't do it because they didn't know what was happening. They concealed it from the FAA, and therefore Boeing was charged with defrauding the United States of America.
2 out of every 3 airplanes that fly in this country are Boeing airplanes. The contributing causes to most everything outside of the Alaska accident relate to a variety of inputs that are downstream with respect to operating and maintenance and et cetera with an airplane. Alaska was a manufacturing defect. I'm not aware of any others that were. And we cannot allow one unsafe airplane to leave our factory. And so we are totally focused on everything that may have contributed to that. I will say this, every issue that occurs out in the field with an airplane, our industry doesn't actually point fingers at each other. We all rally around whatever happened.
Wouldn't you agree that a team of managers has to be held responsible for this kind of losing record?
Senator, we have made a very significant number of changes, starting with the tragedies that occurred. We have a whole new board, engineering representatives on that board, airplane experience on that board, safety on that board, replaced every single leader across the executive leadership team. between 2020 and where we are today. And then we took actions with respect to the Alaska accident, specific to the MAX 737 production program. I do believe in accountability.